So how many Kol Nidre evenings does this make for you? Think of the first one you can remember. For some of us, that may be a little bit closer in time. For others, a little more distant. Most likely, it brings back memories of the people we were with when we were young. Beloved parents, brothers, sisters, friends, grandparents, aunts and uncles. It should conjure the synagogue of our youth, that place that gave us the impression that's Judaism. For me, it's the voice of my earliest child, Cantor. Cantor Firestone comes alive in my mind, along with all the ways my delinquent friends and I would make fun of him when he wasn't looking. Our traditions give us comfort. Part of the comfort they give us is the knowledge that they'll always be there for us. No matter what happens in the larger world, no matter what may happen to the S&P 500, on Erev Yom Kippur, Jews will gather. The words of Kol Nidre will be sung, and our thoughts will turn inward. What if it didn't happen? Imagine for a minute that the synagogues had their doors closed. Imagine that was happening everywhere. Where would we turn? You know, it's not such a crazy thought. At least not as crazy as it used to be. We live in times of great flux and change. One of those books of the summer that they announce was The Unwinding by George Packer. I don't know if any of you read it. He's a journalist who detailed in journalistic fashion the lives of multiple people, Americans from all walks of life, from the wealthy to the poor, the West Coast, the East, the North, the South, the Midwest. He tracks them from their childhoods through their adulthoods, showing how they became the people that they are. But in doing so, he tells a history of our institutional life in America as well, or more accurately, the disruption, or unwinding as he calls it, of our institutions. What he identifies as this coming apart or unwinding is synonymous with what economists will identify as the death of the Roosevelt economy, the one that ruled for 50 years from roughly 1930 on, and has now largely disappeared. We know what we associate that economy with. If you drive over the bridge to get on the Cape, you see the sign, 1935. Public schools, infrastructure, large-scale manufacturing, all those things that seem to be gone forever, or at least are rapidly disappearing. So what does this entail for us today? Well, as of June of this year, Gallup polling, if we can trust them after last year's election, tells us this. The institution Americans trust most by an overwhelming majority of 76% is the United States military. After that, 2/3 of us trust small business. A little better than half trust the police. Religious institutions, just a little less than half, 48%. The only institutions a majority of Americans trust, the police, small businesses, and the military. So what does it mean for us as a religious institution? I'm hoping at least 48% of you trust us. It means that religious institutions are doing better than the presidency at 36%, or public schools at 32%, or God forbid Congress at 10%. An all-time low in the poll. Unwinding is the word. Things that were once counted upon are no longer held in regard. We are a society in flux. So imagine again, what if the doors were closed? What if there was no Kol Nidre? One of the people that Packer details is Sam Walton of Walmart fame. And he identifies what he calls the Walmart effect. Now, for those of you who don't know who Sam Walton is or have never been to a Walmart, he's a man who started out small and built the biggest retailing operation in the world. Now, these stores, of course, have had some very distinct effects. The first thing you'll notice when you walk into a Walmart is stuff there's cheaper. But there are some other effects that it's also had. It tends to drive away other businesses, especially if a Walmart is located in an ex-urban or rural area, which is why we've only allowed one on Cape Cod. Sourcing of goods tends to go to low-wage countries, because in order to keep the prices low, you need to find a place where the goods can be produced cheaply. Inside the stores, they tend to be lower-wage jobs as well, without much in the way of benefits. Yes, Walmart provides a lower cost of living for everybody who shops there. They also have the effect of creating a lower standard of living in the communities where they open. It's paradoxical. But we see the same thing all over the country. It's not just Walmart. Everywhere, wages are being squeezed, people are being pushed into part-time, benefits are becoming a thing of the past. At the same time, corporate profits are at a record high. Packer does not evaluate these things in terms of morality, but simply documents them. This is where we are. This is what's going on in America today. It worked so well for Walmart, we should note, that Sam Walton's 6 heirs are worth around $100 billion today. By the way, that's as much worth as the bottom 40% of Americans, by point of comparison. We are certainly in flux, and more than ever, many of us are in free fall. And let's face it, part of the Walmart effect is the way it affects our perceptions. We tend to have a belief, I can get it cheaper. I know I've been victim to this, looking on website after website for the product, right? If any of you have ever gone into a store with a smartphone and scanned the UPC code just to check, the mentality is there. It's part of that lack of loyalty to institutions. We don't necessarily shop in the same stores because, well, I'm looking out for myself, and we don't think of the long-term chain of effects. We're coming to have a more transactional attitude towards our lives. Each person there for him or herself will do what's right for us. Yes, if an institution can provide what I need, I'll take it. If it doesn't provide what I need, I'll leave it. I'll only take what I need, nothing else. It's created in our society an almost total blindness to what economists call negative externalities. Negative externalities are those deleterious consequences of behavior that don't show up immediately or imminently. Think about it. We live on Cape Cod, one of the most beautiful places in America, and yet we have poor air quality. Why? Because our neighbors in Midwestern states burn coal to get their electricity. The dust finds its way down to us. Consequently, 1 in 7 children on Cape Cod have asthma. You ever drive badly? Nail it when you leave a green light? Wait till the last minute to step on the brakes? Drive too fast? We all know what that does to your mileage, right? You get a hit in the pocket. We don't think about, well, we're actually using more gas, which drives up the total demand, which makes it more expensive for everybody. Negative externalities. The list goes on, as you might imagine. This behavior has an effect on Jewish life, too. I bring by point of example what's gone on in the United Synagogue for Conservative Judaism and the Union for Reform Judaism. If we look at the United Synagogue, it's pretty amazing. What was once, and in recent memory, the largest Jewish denomination in the United States is in, by most estimates, free fall. They've lost almost 30% of their members in the last few decades. 30%. They're running enormous debts and deficits at a movement level. They've had to raid their endowment fund simply to meet operating budget over the last few years. They have an aging population. The average age of a member of a conservative synagogue is now in the mid-50s. There are hopes that they've reached some point of stability, but we just don't know yet. What once was the strongest and most representative movement is no more. Well, that leaves us. The Union for Reform Judaism is now the biggest denomination in the United States. Something we should be proud of, but something that we should not be triumphalist over. Because, as the demographers can tell us, part of our growth is a result of those who left the conservative synagogues. And let's face it, we've had our own troubles too. This economic downturn and our demographic shifts have not necessarily been kind to Reform Judaism either. As was disseminated at the last URJ biennial, our get-together every 2 years to educate, to plan, and to take the temperature of our movement, it was disseminated that 80% of our teenagers will leave synagogue activities by the time they get to 12th grade. 80%. Well, the last Jewish population survey done in 2000 bears that out, because it told us that 70% of people who grow up in Reform congregations are now unaffiliated. 70%. And this is true across all age groups. This is not just the young. Let's face it, we see it in our own families as well. Despite our best efforts to pass on our values, we just can't know. And we know from our own children and our grandchildren the truth of that 70% figure. In New York, 74% of all Jewish school-age children are Orthodox. 74%. Now, New York has its own demographics, and perhaps they're not representative of the entire country, but demographers are telling us that this is increasingly so. Rabbi Norman Lamb, the chancellor of Yeshiva University, the modern Orthodox institution, went so far as to declare a few years ago, and I quote, "With a heavy heart, we will soon say Kaddish on the Reform and conservative movements." Now, I think Rabbi Lamb is subject to some overstatement. But this is what he's looking at. Is this simply another form of unwinding in our Jewish institutions? There's been heavy-duty reorganization at the level of the URJ and lots of ferment. Downsizing, changing of direction, changing of services offered. Everybody's looking for a solution. How do we redirect ourselves? Rabbi Dana Kaplan, who's rabbi at B'nai Israel in Albany, Georgia, summed up our situation this way, and I quote, "As the Reform movement has increasingly emphasized religious autonomy and the importance of choosing what each person finds spiritually meaningful, it has become impossible to compel members to come to services regularly, study Torah seriously, and contribute to the vibrant well-being of their congregation. Instead, they're allowed to come twice a year and call on the rabbi whenever they need a life cycle ceremony. This is a devil's bargain being made between an often self-satisfied leadership and a mostly apathetic laity. Many Reform synagogues have large numbers on the books, but few active participants. This unhealthy situation cannot continue indefinitely. We are now seeing the consequences of the benign neglect that has been plaguing Reform Judaism for many years." I'm glad Rabbi Kaplan said that and not me. I'm not as pessimistic as Dana Kaplan is. I think we have a lot more active members. People just don't always see the way in which they are active, many times behind the scenes and quietly. And he's also prescribing a theological solution. If only we all believed the same thing, if we promulgated a unity of vision, we'd be fine. We used to do that well when we were classical Reform Jews. But he does strike at a difficult truth in describing our conundrum. Because if the fruit liberal Judaism is bearing falls far from the tree or doesn't give seed and mature, shouldn't we be thinking about a different fertilizer? Triumphalism doesn't serve us well. The default connection of previous generations of Jews, well, they're Jewish, they'll just do Jewish, works even less well than it might have before. So, there's another school of thought on this solution. One, Rabbi Jack Wertheimer, who's a professor of history at the Jewish Theological Ceremony, wrote a lengthy piece for Commentary magazine in 2008. And this is what he said in terms of description. Again, by emphasizing autonomy, Reform Judaism has inadvertently weakened the commitment of many of its adherents to the collective needs of the Jewish people. Though the leadership remains intensely attached to Israel and to the welfare of Jews around the world, and has invested in a Reform presence in many parts of the globe, a connection to the Jewish people does not rank high in the priorities of many self-professed Reform Jews. And sadly, the surveys bear out Wertheimer. He points out our emphasis in the last 40 years on personal choice in practice has had some effects we don't like. Those effects, namely, lower affiliation, less personal practice of Judaism among Reform Jews, no real clear definition of what it is that we believe in. We're very good at what we are opposed to, but articulating what we believe in as a baseline, that's harder. That there's a crisis in Jewish literacy. We're essentially asking Jews to make informed choices about their practice without any information. The overemphasis on the individual and our essential discomfort in describing or even prescribing what a committed Jewish life should look like for a Reformed Jew has inadvertently led to a dissolution of our sense of peoplehood and our collective destiny. It's those negative externalities again. I'm going to do what I think is right for me, because that's working. We don't think about the effects it has on everybody else. Others in the Reform movement are also looking at institutional changes as holding the key. But I'm afraid it just means we're putting the same old wine into new bottles. Others think we're just overthinking the problem. They say we have a rising problem with affiliation because Jews aren't affiliating, so we should attack directly. Rabbi Evan Moffick, who's at Congregation Soleil in Highland Park, Illinois, well, he says that we should just go right to the source. If people find synagogues too expensive, too boring, or even irrelevant to their lives, then leadership should do something about that. We should promote membership more fully. As he says, this task does not require us to reimagine synagogues or transform the ways in which they are funded. The challenge must not be redefined, but met. Reformed synagogues simply need to do what synagogues have done for the last 2,500 years: serve as centers of Jewish living and community. And Reformed synagogues in particular must remain an open door for anyone who wishes to walk through it. Reformed Judaism historically, since the 19th century, has been built on partnerships between rabbis and lay leadership. It is the unique strength of our movement. Our path back to strength is with cultivating that lay leadership and bringing to bear their passion and expertise from the many disciplines represented in our membership. It's a scary time, but it's also exhilarating. Yom Kippur asks us to look back at our deeds of the last year. It also asks us to look forward. What will we do? To what will we dedicate ourselves? Now here at my 9th Kol Nidre in the Cape Cod Synagogue, I can say I've been blessed to work with some tremendous lay leaders. Each president who has held the post has brought his or her unique gifts and intelligence to that position. And I can personally vouch for how deeply every one of them cares about our present and our future. So I want to make a challenge. It's Yom Kippur. How many of you engaged in Torah study of any kind in the last year? Try making it a habit. It's the basic key to our Jewish identity. Whether you do it here, or you do it on your own, or you do it online, Take a few minutes every day. It's the single biggest thing you can do to contribute to our Jewish future. If we haven't seen you here since last year, make it a point to come a couple times during the year. Prayer isn't easy. Nobody said it would be. It takes practice to find your place. And often the key to successful prayer is comfort with the group of people you're with. It's ancient wisdom for our people, but it's still relevant. If you haven't volunteered for a committee in a while or ever, hey, it's time. You have gifts. Our community needs them. We need you to be strong in order to build the future, because our future will only be as strong as our lay leadership. I love being the rabbi of the Cape Cod Synagogue, and I'll do everything I can to lead it forward, but I can't be the designated Jew. Put a little more time into the synagogue. Every survey tells us people who volunteer, they're happier people. Look at the beautiful place you sit in. This didn't happen by accident. The Cape Cod Synagogue is the result of decades of people who care. If you haven't noticed the solar array on our roof, take a look. That happened because of committed volunteers and a partnership between our leadership and me. In order to make a project like that happen, it took our leaders, our lay leaders, who brought knowledge of contracts and finance, leasing, building, budgeting. We needed every bit of it. Certainly stuff well outside of my knowledge base. Well, now, we're generating all of our own power. All of it. Tuesday was the day, by the way. If you didn't notice, or if you haven't been on a website to look, Tuesday was the day we reached our engineered limit for a year of power production. That's about a month ahead of schedule. That means we're in surplus for electricity generated this year. We're lowering our carbon footprint. It took a year to get that solar array up. A year of effort, research, care, board deliberation. Now we're a national leader. We're a national leader in renewable energy in the Union for Reform Judaism. We did it not for this year, but we did it for the next 30 years because we care about the world and the generation to come. And we want to show that we're still in it. We still get what's going on today, and there are Jewish answers. We are committed for the long haul, but we need all of you to lend a hand in plotting our course and guiding us forward. We're building a Jewish future here at the Cape Cod Synagogue, and your voice matters if we are to continue in our success. Be a part of this future. Secure it. There's no one else to look to. There's no one here but us chickens. We're it. Imloata imatai, as Rabbi Hillel said thousands of years ago. If not now, when? The Marchatima Tova may be sealed for a good and a healthy year of 5774.